They make the trek out to Burning Man for a week and a day. After a lot of work, oh, there's a lot of play. Party, 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 drama, 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 bitch, bitch, bitch. Year after year, they come back to scratch that itch. They all say their lives have been changed. After many years, lives have been rearranged. That change is what this show is all about. You'll see the impact of Burning Man up and out. So sit back, relax, and cancel all your plans. These are the stories about the shadow of the man.
Hello, and welcome to the Shadow of the Man Show. I am your host, Andy. That Andy? Today, our guest is the one and only Amy Bunker. Welcome, Amy.
Yay. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. What an honor. Yeah.
So, give us like a brief 2-minute description of like your Burning Man experience. Like, who are you?
Oh, wow.
In the world of Burning Man.
The elevator pitch, the nutshell version. Let's see. How can I distill the cloud to a raindrop? Let's see.
Yeah. So when did you first go?
I first went in 2001. I was living in Santa Cruz at the time, and I had heard about it in 99, right when Woodstock was sort of resurrected, the 30-year anniversary. And
oh yeah.
I don't know if you recall, but
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, it was sort of called like rape stock in the background because so many women were getting assaulted, like not just in their tents, but on the field. And
yeah,
coming from sort of festival culture, camp out culture, I was like, I'm not going to go out to the Mad Max version of that in the middle of the, no way. Like that was my first impression, was no way, no how. And then some of my teacher's assistants, they were sort of reporting back just these really obscure, like one of the women was of Asian descent and she had gone around with like a cigar case selling Asian culture in center camp. And that just kind of like.
That was like in 2000 or something?
This is 98 probably.
98, wow.
Yeah. And then I was in the Bronze Foundry at UC Santa Cruz. I was finishing out, I had started off in psychology and geology, and then shifted to the fine arts and went into intermedia. And I had sort of rounded out in the Bronze Foundry. I was really process oriented. I loved positive, negative space, learning along the way instead of, I wasn't committed to the final product usually, which is really funny working in bronze because it's eternal. So that was kind of daunting, but part of my experimental exploration with materials. And my bronze professor, Sean Monahan, who is still one of my favorite people and professors to this day, just so inspiring and interesting, and still a very active and successful artist in Santa Cruz. He gave us a little slideshow giving his background in San Jose State and some of his graduate work, which was really, once again, impressive to me. And out of a show of like 40 slides, about a dozen of them were of Black Rock City, of Birmingham. And so he had been going out there and sort of, he's like, honestly, I'll kind of paraphrase his, what my download was from that show was something to the effect of, if you're serious about being a visual artist, then you have to make a pilgrimage to Mecca. And Burning Man is changing the course of art history. It's blowing the walls off of galleries. You can't get it from my pictures or my stories. You have to go out and experience it for yourself. You have to like see the color that can't be seen else how, or snort the Kool-Aid or whatever the thing is. You got to go see it to believe it and feel it and experience it in your own right. And so with that, I was like, well, I want to go, like I'm compelled to go, but I still had reservation. It wasn't until I did the Landmark Forum, actually. I had a partner. So I was really interested in the field of psychology, and I kind of shifted out of it in college because it's so fascinated with deviance. And I just wanted to know like how humans be, the study of ontology, a more universal model, a more not so westernized and American, and one of my friends said, Amy, you got to do the Landmark Forum. That's kind of that's the education you're looking for. And so even with that, I'm like, sure, whatever. It wasn't until someone actually invited me, opened the door, and the forum deals in a language of possibility. It speaks to like you develop a possibility for your life and then you live into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I met a lot of burners. I was doing this in the Bay Area at the time, in Oakland and San Jose region, going up from Santa Cruz. And a lot of people were saying that Burning Man is landmark realized.
Hmm.
It's people living into their possibilities. It's a whole
Ah.
city of possibility. And even with that, I was still like, wow, this is really piquing my curiosity. Like, I'm
Uh-huh.
inspired, but I didn't actually go until I graduated the forum and I did their whole curriculum for a living. They have a self-expression and leadership program. Then I volunteered for the Landmark Forum for Teens because I just felt like
Ah.
this kind of technology was so helpful for me in terms of shifting my perspective and realizing we're just little meaning making machines, and we actually have a little control in the process if we can realize how we're conditioned in that way, you know.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
um and so anyways, yeah, a friend in the forum turned me onto an email list. This was in the late 90s, so there wasn't like social media or anything.
Yeah,
So he just passed along an email list, and the amount of times the word love had come up in that
yeah.
also was like a wow. I really don't think I know what I'm talking about here. I think I'm assuming a lot about what this thing is, and I don't actually know. But it wasn't until 3 days before the event in 2001, one of my teacher assistants, Joey Shep, who I just really admired, he had done some really awesome self-inspired exploration of biomimicry, which wasn't even really a term back then, you know.
Yeah.
He was just really pushing that. He had like two-inch binders of self-exploration that he presented to one of our classes, and I was just like, I
Wow.
love your brain, you know. I was just so switched on by the way he thought about the world and his self-initiating sort of conquest. And he said, hey Amy, you want to go to Burning Man with me? And I was like, with you? Yes. And like now, yes. And he was a raw foodist, and I worked at a New Leaf
Ah.
Deli in Santa Cruz. And I was like, listen, Joey, I get the discount. I'm just following your lead. Everything you get two of, and we're good to go. And so he was a design guru. And when we got out there, we had a whole series of tarps and tents and things for shade and whatnot. And it was very
Was that
small.
his first year too, or did
Yes.
he? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he invited along a friend of ours, Peter, who rest in peace, was a wonderful addition to our camp. And we had a little Earth flag, and we called ourselves Camp Earthship. And that predecessed, that was before Michael Reynolds founded Biotexture and Earthships. So, or maybe even around the same time, but we didn't know about it. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
I've since worked with him, which is kind of an interesting little full circle.
yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, Joey and Peter and I went out there and we just ate raw cantaloupe and avocados and raw coconuts. And then once our sort of personal needs were met for the day, which was really basic food, water, rest, then it was just game on. And I got to bounce around the desert with Joey, my little baby kangaroo friend, who's just also, we were just geeking out on all like, this is the art. Oh my God, that's the artist. We get to meet the art and like talk and help them with the piece and take pictures. And now it was,
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
was so much interface and it was so grand. And oh
So
man,
have you
I
been
was
going?
like hook, line, and sinker. Like
Yeah.
I was just on
Yeah.
another planet. Like this is possible. I can't.
Yeah.
And it was for me, and it still remains like one of the largest gathering of hive mind creativity force,
Hmm.
as far as I can tell, on a planet that isn't guided by commerce. Like I lived in
Yeah.
Austin for a while, and South by Southwest is just like booms hive mind on in terms of interactive music, film, everything.
Hmm.
It's such a creative juju force. In LA and New York, like these awesome incubators, you know, at least in America. I mean, they're worldwide too, but Burning Man just offered something so unique for me, especially coming from festival culture. Like
Okay.
I didn't see a single cigarette butt. I didn't see a single beer can. I just couldn't believe it. I just was like, oh my
In
God.
2001, you're talking about? Really?
Yeah, like I can't believe it when everyone takes care of their own shit, there's
Yeah.
shit
Yeah.
to take care of. Like
Yeah.
what a concept. Imagine if the world operated with just that principle. Leave
Yeah,
no
just the
trace.
one leave no
Even,
trace. Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
or
so
even campground principle. Leave it better than you found it.
oh
You know,
yeah, yeah. So and
from
have you been going like every year since? Like have you missed any years?
I have indeed missed some years. I was in a good chronological order until my sister got married in 2004 and I was her bridesmaid and she was like
Yeah.
her maid of honor. And she's like, Amy, are there any dates that don't work? And I'm like, just the one.
Well, then
Just the
let's do it
one.
then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she got married the night the man burned. I debated wearing dusty clothes down her aisle.
Well, did you ever like suggest? He was like, "How about a destination wedding,
Oh,
huh?"
I considered it to sort of mandate my family to be like, no, you need to come to my city and see why this is so important to me. Like, why, like, cast your judgment aside because I had it too for many years. I thought I
Yeah.
knew what it was. And
And
until
then
I
you
went
also weren't you like you were the first regional contact for New Hampshire, right?
to Vermont and Maine, yeah,
Vermont. Oh yeah,
three
all
states.
three. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. In 2004, I missed it. I came back here because for my sister's wedding and then she had a baby. So I moved back to support her. And in '05, I contacted the project, the Burning Man organization, just like, hey, I'm in the Northeast. What's going on here? Kind
Uh-huh.
of like what George Papp did in
Yeah.
Texas when he went back and went, how do I connect with other burners? And they
I
were
think
like,
that's how we
oh,
all kind of did it. Like, because like for me out in
became
Hawaii, it was the same thing where I was like,
who's
why
who
is there
else?
nothing happening out here? Like, why isn't somebody doing something? And then I was just like, well, I guess I'll throw my hat in the ring. Like, honestly, I just wanted someone to do it, like not necessarily
Me.
me,
Well,
you
it's a
know, like,
democracy. Yeah. You
yeah,
volunteer yourself. So,
yeah. But
if
then
you
I
see
guess
something that
like,
needs to get done, ultimately you're the one to spearhead that initiative generally, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
So, but
exactly.
I wasn't intending to become a leader in any way, shape, or form. I was just sort of checking in to see who else back here knew what the heck I was talking about.
Hmm.
Like it was just it was so enigmatic at the time. It was this post-apocalyptic, whatever the media had said about it, pagan,
Yeah,
whatever. Sure, it's all those things, but it was a lot more than that too. So I'm sort of like, who was it? Who else knows what else? I don't know. Anyway,
yeah,
I got on the horn with Bex Ryan,
yeah.
who became one of my dearest jellies, one of my dearest friends, and immediately we just hit it off. We had such a great conversation, and she's like, "So basically, there's nothing going on back there. You're what's going on, and also
You have the job.
you want to cover New Hampshire or Vermont and Maine, like the neighboring states, which also weren't really covered. And at the time, there was an email list for each. There was like 100 people in each state, and I would say out of those 300 people that were my constituents, so to speak, um, maybe only 10% had gone, maybe 30 people had gone. And
Huh.
of that, maybe only 10% of that were actually active. So I only had like
Uh,
3 people in my network that were actually showing up and like responding and being like, oh my God, someone else, let's do a thing.
yeah.
I've got so much art and creativity and I've got stencils and I've got ideas and like I want to do that with friends and meet new people. So we did like meet and greets at breweries and little stuff like that. And then I started going to the regional network. So I was there at the first
The
regional,
summit.
yep, the summit that was at the old
Yeah.
headquarters, which
Was
was
that
just so
2006 when I was still
special.
like a China Basin, that one?
It was down at the headquarters on like Third Street, Howard, or I forget. It was in their old headquarters that had all the
Yeah.
pod breakout rooms, and it was
Do you
so.
remember that there was like a protest outside?
Oh, it was so. I
Like,
mean, there was. Yeah,
yeah.
actually I remember. Yeah, it was like Cacophony Society, I think, that came in,
Yeah, or
wasn't it?
something.
And they were snarking on us. I just loved the grassrootsness. Nobody really knew what was going on, but I called it the Burning House of Representatives because it was
Yeah.
really all the people from around the world that had kind of been like, what's going on in your place? What's going on? We're all
Yeah, we're kind of building it all
dealing with
together. Like,
different
yeah.
communities, but we have similar strains and even our contrast can kind of provide some perspective, like or match a thing like Abby was one of St. Abby or Stabby. She was one of three regionals for New York, and they had like five email lists. It was just chaos. They had so many
Yeah.
people and not enough space, and I was like, dude, I have a tiny network, and we have so much space. Like there was a whole arts institute. We ended up doing our first regional burn, inviting
Hmm.
leaders from Boston and New York and Philly to be like, come on up. Like we've got so much space. Just come in and enjoy
Yeah.
the weekend, see what it's like to be a participant again instead of having to spearhead all do all the time. It's like nice to be a little bit
Yeah. Yeah.
back
So how
to,
long did you do the regional contact thing for?
yeah, so I was a RC from '05 to '09 for New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine, so about 5 years. And then
Okay.
passed the torch on to three different people for each state, which was really wonderful. And then I moved to Austin, Texas, because they were sort of, as far as I was concerned, they were the initiation and inception of the regional network. And at the time, they had just burnt a clock tower in downtown
Oh
Austin.
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like, this is shifting from just burner culture. Now we're going into civic
Hmm.
exposure and this. And I was really turned on by the regionals, like Pat Wheaton and George Papp and Chris Lord.
Yeah.
What they were speaking to in pod discussions was just so innovative and curious and humble and wisdom and wise and really
Yeah.
like we're just a part of the experiment too. Like their format for governing was so slapstick, and I was like, you can do that. Oh my god, that's hilarious. I want to be a part of that. So I moved there, and immediately Pat Wheaton was really my sort of red carpet to move to
Hmm.
Austin, and immediately I assumed the position. They had just sort of created this for the community of regional art ambassador. And so
Oh.
I was the regional art ambassador for Burning Flipside for 2 years. And right before that, I went to nowhere too. I was going to regionals all over the world because
Ah.
Hampshire was so tiny. We had Firefly was a Boston regional, and I had gone to that, and it wasn't.
Well, Firefly is a Boston regional, but it's in Vermont.
That's true. Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
little confusing. And Peter Durand was the co regional for Boston,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he also didn't even know Crispel Wagner was the other co. He was sort of the one who was, as far as I know, he was very enigmatic. He's Katie Hazard's husband now,
Yeah. Yeah.
but she's the art director for Burning Man, and so he's a little more like out from behind the curtain. But he had a very Wizard of Oz to me and Peter at the time. We're like, who is this guy? What's he doing? And where is this? And what's going on? And I had just done a pyrotechnic workshop, and so Peter and I had
Oh.
built these little fireflies in the fashion of a man, with like the ribbing and the waxed canvas and 3 foot sparkler antenna, and
Wow. That's cool.
we had braided their little tails. They were like a series of fountains, those ones that really up in the air.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But we had done like 6 on their butts and braided those
Yeah.
together. So when they took off, it was like a jet. They almost knocked themselves over.
Heh.
And that was the only thing that initiated the pyre that year because it was so wet and damp, and they had riddled it with fuel and pyrotechnics. They just dumped aerials in there. It was like the most haphazard burn I had ever been to. And I did ranger training, and I was just like, we are not abiding by any of that protocol right now. It was sheer pandemonium. And Peter and
Yeah.
I were both just like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
In our name, on our
Well,
land.
it's
It's
the Wild
wild. I
West
mean,
early days. Yeah.
it was awesome, but it
Yeah.
wasn't my I was interested in. I went to Rebirth in Hawaii. I went
Oh
to
yeah.
Nowhere in Spain. I went to the Philadelphia experiment, and anytime I was in a different region, I just check out what their burner scene was like, because it was always different. There's always a different flavor and
Hmm.
expression, and I just loved that. It's like
So what
there's this.
about nowadays? Like, how are you maintaining your involvement in the Burning Man community?
Oh, that's a good question. It's interesting. I mean, I'm 20 years in plus, and
Yeah.
I feel like not like I've done my time and I'm over it in any way, shape, or form, but I've been from manager to minion and direct. I've had big hats and been behind the scenes, and I'm sort of what like my most recent affiliation, I suppose, would be with Loveburn down in Miami.
Ah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Yeah. They've been
yeah,
in the Burning Man news as of late
yes,
this year.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. They just kind of relinquished their regional status um, because they're not abiding by sort of the org's protocol of being a nonprofit. And I know all of the sort of people that run the ship,
Uh-huh.
Glenn Prosperity, Brian, and Jack Trash, and they work really well together. That module works for them, having a board of directors,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not going to sell it. They don't have like huge assets. They have like two rotting containers full of it's their quartermaster. It's just like their tools and stuff. You know what I mean? Like all
Yeah.
goes right back into the event, and they're one of the biggest generators of arts grants, and I mean, in the
Is that the main
millions of
issue?
dollars, and also donating to the org too. So I'm
Ah.
working with their art team this year, and I've been there working for Charlie Smith and the Art of Such and Such. We built the effigy muncher 3 years ago because they have like effigy restrictions based on fire and wind. So they had
Ah.
little effigies that we could drop into the muncher that would consume them, and that
Oh,
that
that's cool.
that was a fun project to work on. And then I worked with ESD my second year, and then last year, which is Emergency Services Department,
Uh-huh.
and then last year I worked with DPW, Department of Public Works, and helped build the effigy. And then this year I'll work for Hartery. So it's kind of a little microcosm of how I've dealt with the man too. Each year I've tried to work with a different department.
Yeah.
Other than my regional stint was probably my longest devotion to one thing. Second in place would be restoration. So I've worked in the restoration
That's
department
right.
for
Yeah.
several years, and I've done Resto. I was the site or the test team administrator in 2019. The first time that position was offered, I helped train pretty
Uh-huh.
much the whole Resto team. Each day I'd take 5 different people and we do those radial line sweeps. The BLM comes in and does at the end, and that sort of ensures our contract for the next year. So I was able to train. I had like a waiting list. We had so much fun, and we'd go out and do all the honorarium projects. We do sites like red spots in the city and just kind of
Uh-huh.
clean those up. I kind of felt like we were like this green shotgun blast of the BLM just as random GPS points, and so at least we knew that on the map we'd have like green spots all over the place. So
So you've done like almost everything. I'm just trying to
I've
think
done
like
almost everything. Yeah, I
like
actually
what other departments have you
other
not worked? It's like maybe like
it's funny.
mutant vehicles.
I have not done vehicles. Yeah, it's kind of wild when you start to get into Burning Man as a city. I mean, it is not a festival. There are festival components of it, of course, but no festival has an airport and a post office and an operating water, plumbing, electricity, roads. I mean, like DPW
Yeah.
alone blankets so much of operations. I
Yeah.
haven't worked in every department in DPW, but I've worked. Um, so I'll rattle off a little bit of my Burning Man resume if
Sure.
I can try to keep it under 2 minutes here.
Well, I think we blew
Well,
past that like 20 minutes ago.
yeah, so starting with the regional network, and then I started in 2000, I think it's around 5. I read the honorarium list, and there was this project called the Dragon Smelter, and Danny Macchiarini, who's a third generation jeweler in San Francisco, he has a beautiful shop there. He fashioned the only ring that Larry would ever wear, and
Really?
he made Will and Crimson's wedding rings. I was there when he gave them to them.
Oh.
A significant jeweler decorator in the background, but very an awesome, humble
Hmm.
uh, individual who was doing this project called the Dragon Smelter, and he would take cans from aluminum camp, smelt them down in his dragon fashioned
Oh
foundry, and then
yeah.
pour them into open face relief molds right there on the playa. I was like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, I read through the honorariums and I'm like, this project's so cool. And I wrote to him and said, your project's so cool. And wow, you're doing like real time recycling and in this industrial art, this process based. Wow, wow, wow. And with my experience in the foundry, I'm just like, whoa. And he's like, wait, you have experience in the foundry? Oh, well, I mean, do you want to be part of our team? And boom, I met him
Yeah.
that year, and I was in spats, and I'm the slag maiden, and I'm facing the crucible, and it was just like once the immediacy to not just interface and meet the artist, but to be a part of it immediately. Like it just kind of blew my mind. That's continuously been a theme, and has inspired me to contact a lot of my heroes. I love architecture. That's sort of my
Uh-huh.
greatest passion, and I've met almost all of my architectural heroes and been able to meet and work with them
Hmm.
because Burning Man let me know you can just write them an email and they'll likely
So do
respond.
you think Burning Man kind of like helped you give you that kind of courage, or it's just like,
Thousand.
oh, you're like I can just go meet and connect with people even if we've never met before? Like,
Yeah, yeah, and
yeah,
also this well, the principle of immediacy. If not now, when? Like if I don't, what's the worst that can happen? If I write to my favorite person and I say, "Hey,
yeah,
I love what you've brought to me," and who isn't going to be like, "Wow, thanks."
yeah.
At least, like that would be the nice thing to do if you're not too egotistical and like don't have too much time in your day to respond to your
I don't
fans.
think there'll be very many people who would just be like, get lost, loser. I get compliments all the time,
You
like,
know what's a trip is how so I used to in Austin, this is hilarious. I'd drive around and I'd see homes that I loved
uh-huh.
and I'd write the homeowners postcards, anonymous postcard, be like well, with my name and my website and my email. And I'd say, hey, I'm a designophile. I love design and I love your home. I'd love to learn more about it. And I know it's kind of creeper to hear from a weirdo for like stranger, but here's my website. Here's my email. If you're open to conversing, I'm just sort of interested.
Uh-huh.
Almost every single homeowner not only responded but invited me into their home, except for one individual who was like, I honor my privacy, but then he gave me like 6 different articles about his amazing home,
Huh.
including that gave me so many details about his personal life that
Like too much.
I was
Yeah.
like, this is actually kind of ironic. This is like the Barbara Streisand effect where you want to keep something
Yeah.
covert but it gets blown up. Anyways,
I mean, I
yeah,
imagine
so
like all of those people probably wanted to show off their creation, They're like they spent all this time creating and crafting and fashioning, and like and here somebody is like asking them the pertinent questions about it, and like I'm like who wouldn't be like it's like, oh, let me tell you about that. I've just been waiting for someone to come and ask me about that. People come up and they just like want to sell like, cookies or something,
well,
it's
they
like
want something from you. Most people that
yeah.
contact you want something, and
Mhm.
to be contacted and just be appreciated is unfortunately unique.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
and I've got like 3 guys that are stemming to mind, and I'll just kind of briefly. Bart Prince, the architect, I drove by his studio in Albuquerque. I wrote him a postcard. He invited me to his studio. I met him within a month. And it wasn't about him being like, oh, and this is my stuff and things. He was like, what is it in you that is so fascinated in me? Like the curiosity gets reflected back. It gets reciprocated in a really interesting way. Brian Froud, who was the architectural director behind the Dark Crystal and
Oh.
and the Muppets and
Hmm.
just fairies in general. I took a Muppet magic class in college and he came to our course. I got to thank him for molding my childhood. Like, wow, your creative vision it just sparked my imagination in so many ways. And thank you. And he immediately said, no, thank you. And I was like, wait, what? No, I'm thanking you. Even Danger Ranger, I love him so
Uh-huh.
much. I attribute so much credit to him for. I think he's the grandpappy of Burning Man, as far as I'm concerned, with the cacophony roots and
Oh yeah.
artworks and temporary autonomous zones. And then he's still so active and awesome and snarky. And he was in the commissary passing out cards just this year. He's one of the only board members that continually interfaces with the public. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
and is still like participatory in a really cacophonous way. And I remember at a party in San Francisco many moons ago, and in Austin when he came to do a lecture, both times I approached him and said, I just want to thank you so much for being so wonderful. You are just so full of wonder. And he both times he has reflected right back to me and been like, no, you are the goddess energy that I admire and bow down to, or whatever. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, wow, 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 too much there, guy. Like I'm sitting here trying to say thank
Yeah.
you. And
Yeah. That's an
you're
incredible community. Yeah.
yeah. And how that fostered, I was just realizing that I would not have had, I have a permanent public art piece in the city of Austin. That would not have
Oh, you
happened
do?
without Burning Man.
Oh. Talk
Yeah.
about talk about that. What art
Yeah.
piece do you have there?
Yeah. So I have a piece called Pods, and one of the directors from Art and Public Places in Austin, Anna Bradley, she's a burner. And during South by Southwest one year, she decided to sort of, she wanted to branch out not only into Austin itself, but into the burner network and say, hey, why don't you guys put in a grant just put in a concept. Let's get some not amateur but up and coming artists to get some
Hmm.
interface and support within the city. And so I formulated a team with two welders that I loved, and we designed this project for a women, infants, and children center. It was called Pods. It was sort of three mild steel and stainless steel sculptures. They're meant to sort of represent a whimsical familial structure, not necessarily mother, father, son, or mother, son, whatever
Hmm.
families are. It could be the
Yeah.
sister, the auntie, and the child. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like that was sort of the intention, was to make it a little more playful. But they're huge. They're like 21 foot tall is the biggest one, with a 6 foot
Huh.
spear. And they're permanently installed on the east side of Austin.
Wow.
And even during that project, I derived a lot of inspiration from the artist Ned Kahn, and I contacted him to thank him, and he was like, "Tell me more about your project. Isn't that interesting?" So like, without Burning Man, it's like there's so many little influences as I sit here and reflect on
Oh
uh
yeah.
I listened to some of your other podcasts, and you'd said
Oh
something
great.
like, I don't want to frame it like, what would your life be like without Burning Man? But because that's kind of inconsiderable. It's such a hypothetical.
Yeah.
But honestly, I know that with it, I have such a rich creative community. I've fostered so many connections.
Yeah.
I've
All
had
right.
so
Well,
many.
we'll get around to that. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
But
yeah.
well, how about let's go back to the beginning. Like, where does it all start for a little baby Amy
Little
Bunker?
Bunky baby.
Yeah.
Little Amy Bunker was born outside of Boston in the blizzard of 78. Like, I think my dad even like dragged my mom to the hospital on a sled because the freaking roads were too crazy. But yeah, I grew up in the Northeast, in the frigid Northeast, in tiny little white towns, and had a very tiny experience. And then I sort of had a westward expansion. I like my K through 12 was 500 kids, and then I went to a
Hmm.
high school that was 500 kids, and then I went to college, and my class was 500 kids, and I was just like,
Yeah.
whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, my little fish got into a bigger pond as I moved west. So I moved to Colorado first for my high school. I went to Boulder, Colorado. My
Oh.
mom was the executive dean for the MBA programs at the University of Colorado in
Wow.
Denver, and she was a real go-getter. And yeah, much to say about that. But we lost her, unfortunately, in 97. So
Oh.
I've spent most of my adult life without her and felt homeless. Our mothers are our homes. And when she passed, I never had another place that was
Hmm.
home for me. And so arriving in Black Rock Desert and hearing Welcome Home
Yeah. Powerful.
um, landed in a really significant way for me, that was like, oh my God, I can call this temporary city, this mirage in the desert for a week. This is ultimately my home base. It's where I feel most at home.
So your mom passed away in 97. You started hearing
Yeah.
about Burning Man in like 99, 2000. You finally go
Yeah.
2001.
And actually,
Oh,
I want to presence that my father's been out to Burning Man like 3 times. He's worked DPW. He was my,
really?
yeah, he was my assistant for restoration management on the temple in 2013.
Wow.
And his first year was 2011, when he worked on the Circle of Regional Effigies project with us from Austin. We did the Ouroboros project. So he got to come in with that community, which I just loved so much. They're so humble and effective. We finished our project first. We helped a bunch of other teams.
Yeah.
Like, we're there, yeah, we're doing the thing. It was like, it was all slapstick once again. Like the meetings are so fluid and easy and fun and effective. And dad got to see that and be a part of that team in a way that, I mean, he developed such, I would wager to say that my father developed the most profound connections he had in his lifetime
Really?
at Burning Man. I saw him cry with other men, like with a male friend of ours. He came to visit my dad at camp, and I went back to check in on them, and they were both in a moment, and my dad was crying to this young man, and I just kind of like step away from the men emoting, give them their space. Do not need to know what's happening there. Just know that it's really good, that there's some safe space that my friend allowed for my father to go someplace, wherever it was, whatever that thing was that was
So
so
what
tempting.
kind of man was your father? I mean, was he kind of like the stern New England kind of
Well,
rugged backcountry?
my parents were they met and married at Stanford. So my mom
Wow.
was a psychologist and my father was a civil engineer. My dad was definitely militant. He was raised like Boy Scout, Scouts honor, good, decent, very good, kind. But not but very like, what's the best way to describe militant? I mean, he was a veteran, he was a CB. So he
An
built
engineer
infrastructure.
too. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So he wasn't front lines military, but he saw the effects of war. He saw his friends leave and not come back. I mean, he and only at Burning Man was he able to describe and share some of those stories with me because the guard was down and the space was safe.
So is
So he
he the combat veteran? Like
no
or
no,
what?
so he was a CB, so he did
Oh,
infrastructure. That's a branch of the
yeah,
Navy, but it
engineering.
really facilitates all branches of the military. And so that they'd build bridges, they'd take bridges out, they sort of infrastructure based. And he was a leader of a crew. And then when he came back to the States, he was a foreman for construction on the metro station in DC. So he had this really significant position. And then my parents ended up getting their real estate license, and that didn't really work out. My mom went back to get her MBA in the early 80s. And that's when my dad kind of stood down and my mom
Hmm.
became the main breadwinner. And my father kind of checked out from society. He was like, never going to have a boss again. No one can tell him
Yeah.
what can do. Even though he was militant, he was very like anti-disestablishmentarianism. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
definitely not into authority to his dying day. No one could tell him what to do.
But
So,
what did
so,
he think about the structures on the playa? Because I mean, it's not exactly authority, but there is like a
oh, he
functional kind of hierarchy because like things need to function, right?
Yeah, I mean, he would get so starry-eyed when he'd talk about Burning Man. Even he
Huh.
he, he unfortunately passed away this year while I was at
Yeah.
Burning Man, and I made the decision to go because he urged me to. He said, like, his voice would change. He'd just be like, "Oh, Amy, oh, it's just I just know how much you love it out there. It's just so cool out there." I mean, he really, from what maybe would be perceived as freaks, he found friends. I mean, it was just like, wow, these are just people, and they're actually really cool and nice. And I saw him have receive hugs that he was just wasn't a hugger. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like that kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
thing. His crow's feet just expanded while he'd be out there. It was like there's just like undeniable impacts.
Oh
That
yeah.
having him come and see it was very different than me telling him a story about it.
Well, how
You know,
many years did it take for you to like tell him these stories and then for him to finally be like, okay, I'll go?
yeah, great question. It was on my 10th year actually. So because through the regional network, I'd get a free ticket.
Yeah.
I would
Oh
gift
yeah.
someone a free ticket every year. So I would indoctrinate. I would sort of be like, come under my wing. And if you're really interested, I'd like to show you this new town. Have fun. I'm not your tour guide. I'm just sort of like your welcome
Initiator, like yeah.
doormat, whatever.
Yeah.
And on the 10th year, I in 2010, I was camped with Camp by the Ton, was a Dan Das Man camp. It was just like huge. Everything was
Oh.
massive. We had an ice maker in our camp, and it was ridiculous. We had a grand piano. We had this incredible technologist on our crew named Peef, and he had fashioned a lot of different things for the camp, which were just kind of mind blowing. But one of the things he offered as a gift to the city was a satellite phone. So anyone could make a
Ah.
call anywhere in the world for 2 minutes. And we would have a line out the camp every day because this was back in 2010 when in technology.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a hive mind of Google was there. Google were my neighbors in 2008 or nine in center camp actually.
Oh.
Um, and so there's a lot there technology is available, but this was like to the public, and so many people were like, oh my god, I interfaced with someone, my daughter who was having an accident, my dog needed something, I found out about a new job promotion, whatever the thing happened, we created this really awesome little conduit for them.
Huh.
And so it came to Sunday and I was like, I haven't made any calls, like I should use this thing, like I'm just sitting there and I'm like, I'm gonna call my dad. And I'm like, hey, dad, I'm just trying to describe the scene here, like there's a grand piano and there's a 20-foot wide fire circle and there's a sculpture made of a meditating figure that's probably 10 foot tall on top of a container made out of recycled gears and bolts and chain. And oh, and we've got an ice maker in our camp in the middle of the desert. I mean, just like these unbelievable little factoids about real time me right now in the middle of here. And I'm like, you know what? You need to come. I need to invite him to come. Why didn't I invite that? So
I'm
I
just
hate to
wondering what
say
he was thinking, like as you're describing this scene. He's just like,
crazy.
Amy's been
Just
hitting
crazy.
the bong again.
Yeah. No, I mean, you try to describe, and the thing is I don't do drugs at Burning Man. It's too risky, in my opinion.
Yeah,
There's too much of a
yeah.
recovery
I'm
time.
too old for that now anyway, too. Yeah.
Oh,
In
and
fact,
it's
it's so much more enjoyable when you're like, sober and can enjoy
well, you have,
everything fully.
in my
Yeah.
opinion, you kind of have to be. You have to maintain full situational awareness in a
Mhm.
high altitude desert environment that's trying to kill you at all times.
It's
But I
not
mean,
good.
why would you want to
Yeah.
disable that? And you're also trying to decipher what's even real. Did I just see that? Is that really real?
Oh,
Because there's
okay. I gotta
so
tell you
much
this
to reality.
experience that, like, all right, I mean, I've had a number of experiences like this where it's like you're completely totally stone sober, but then you feel like you're tripping. Like I think
Well,
I
and
told a story like on
mhm.
another episode where I think it was like dusk, somewhere in the early 2000s, and like the sun had set, and we're like looking up at the sky, and there was like this like light. And then there was like two lights, and there was like three lights, and they're traveling across the sky. It was almost like a string of pearls, right? And we're
Mm,
just like, and our first thought was just like, oh my God, how did they do that?
right?
you know, and we were
And
just
and
like,
it
somebody
and
did something and we don't know how they did, and we're all kind of like wondering how they did that. And then it was only like 9 months later that the people were like, oh yeah, remember those lights that one day and that like one night at Burning Man? That was actually a Russian booster rocket. It had like the rocket itself had gone up in like the 80s or 90s. It's just like after all these years, it finally like was coming back
no
into the
way.
atmosphere just at that right time, just at that right place. But the whole
Wow.
time we were just like, oh my God, the artist that created that, that's incredible. Well, I gotta figure out how they did that.
Well, that reminds me. In 2007, the man burned early, and there was a there.
Oh yeah.
It was ignited. It was incinerated.
Uh-huh.
But that was on I think a Sunday or Monday night, and at the same time there was a full moon eclipse. And my new comrade and lifelong dear friend Saz and I went out to the trash fence to see this eclipse. And when we got out there, he had offered me some mushrooms. And I was like, oh, no, that's cool. I want to know that what I'm seeing is real. And eclipses are kind of low and slow and maybe even a little boring. And I just really want to be attuned to it, and like be present. But I'm
Yeah.
like, great trip, buddy. Like, if I don't want to, no judgment, no whatever. I like, if you want to go for it,
Oh
go for
yeah. Yeah.
it. And he was like, no, actually, I want to stay on the same wave as you. And an hour or two into the eclipse, mind you, we're way out at trash fence. So the man is it's just got sort of part of the blur of the city in the background. And we see a
Uh-huh.
fire. We see a really big
Ah.
fire. This is on Sunday or Monday when not people are still building. So we're like,
Yeah, no one's burning things there.
we're
Yeah.
like, squidgy, squidgy eyes. Is that a fire? Is that real? No, we can't really. That's not really what we're seeing. And then when we rode back into town, sure as shit, what we had seen was Paul Addis had set the man ablaze. And so we didn't even believe our eyes. And yet what we saw was real.
Yeah.
And that alone, once again, was the sort of like, what if I was on some other dimension, or if my perspective was skewed?
Yeah.
It would have, it would have twisted my experience in that moment, my story, my credity and validation of whatever the event was too.
Yeah.
And, this isn't to discount psychotic
No, everything has
exploration.
its
Like there's
place, but
there's time and
yeah.
place for it, and Burning Man can be conducive for that in a lot of ways. But for me personally, it's like I think I got drunk once in 2004. I made some really bad decisions that I thought
Yeah.
were really funny at the time. I like kind of destroyed my camp and was like, ah ha ha. And then the next morning was like, what did I do to my tent? I'm like, oh no. I remember it was so funny the night before, but yeah, and the
Yeah.
recovery rate. I mean, it's just exacerbated up there at a high altitude when you're dehydrated. No matter, even if you're chugging water and electrolytes all day,
Oh yeah,
you're a
yeah.
human, and
I mean,
it's just not
earlier on, like my standard
life.
process was like it's like we'd show up, we get there, it's usually kind of like late, and like everyone's all like supercharged, and it's like we've been like packing and shopping and preparing and driving and traveling for days, and then we get there and everyone's all super excited, and then we start partying, and well, in the theme song, the Jenny came up with the whole party, 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 drama, 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 bitch, 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 because it's like that's pretty much the order of things, like when you
That can
kind
be
of
a lot of
go,
people's experience. I mean, I'm sort
yeah,
of on like the
that
build,
used to
build,
be,
build. Like,
yeah.
but I think there's something in, Landmark actually really helped inform my volunteerism.
Hmm.
One of the managers for the advanced course, when I was supporting my partner going through it, he had presenced a possibility of invisible impeccability.
Huh.
And what that meant for him was that we want to make sure everything's perfect for the container, for the people to do the work that they need to do in this workshop, whatever. That means all the water is going to be filled, the tissue containers, there's no specks on the carpet. Also, they don't even know that it's happening. They don't even know that we're there doing this production, providing this container for them. So
Oh
the
yeah.
level of service and humility that he presenced for me at the inception point of my volunteerism was like, not only do you not do it for credit, you actually don't even want to be, you want to clean the house and not even let them know that you were there. That's the ultimate
Well, I think
service.
that's the difference between like Burning Man and like Disneyland, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well,
Because it's like with
Disneyland is
Burning
a
Man, it's
consultative
like,
experience. I mean, you go and you consume, and you feel
well, not
entitled
only
to
that, it was just like
paying out
both,
the nose.
yeah. But I mean, not only
You're
that, like both have,
spectating. You're like
yeah.
witness to this grandeur. You're not in it. You're not part of it. You're not
Hmm.
Mickey. You're not Minnie. You're not the princess. You're there to admire that as some separate
Yeah.
thing,
Well,
you
also
know?
it's just like they're there to entertain you, but also I
Yes.
was thinking more just like the rules and the structure. I think with Burning Man, it's kind of more like a skeleton kind of framework, where
For sure.
something like a Disneyland was just like, no, 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 this is the facade,
Well,
like
and this is the catered experience. You go down
yes.
this, you go on this ride, you buy that thing, and then you wear the ears, and then you get a picture in front of the castle. And
Hmm.
at Burning Man, it's like, I mean, it is
Don't
such
go
a,
out of the lines. Like, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it's a very curated experience where I feel like in Black Rock City, when I wake up, it's my favorite city in the world. I wake up, I have my general needs met. I'm usually well fed, showered, read, or slept. Um, I I need to take care of that for myself. Otherwise, I'm gonna have a kind of miserable time in the background.
Yeah, yeah.
And then once all those needs are complete, it's kind of like a bare bone, like the world is the oyster. You just become this little pinball. And I might have a what, when, where, set, time, place thing I want to do or see or go to, but that never ever works as planned.
Nah.
And it's often this is a quote I wanted to present. This is my favorite description of Burning Man.
Okay.
And Michael Danger Ranger brought this to me. It's synchronicity beyond mathematical probability. And
Wow, I like that.
when I said that to him, when I paid him a compliment at that party in San Francisco, I was like, you said something that I just feel like really encapsulates it, because it is. I bounce around the city and I think, oh, you know what? I'd love some horchata. 2 seconds later, ice cold horchata. Like, you can't make that shit up. It's just like this switched on little hive mind. And it's like, I want
Yeah.
to, it's not, I want, but just sort of, it's like vibration, thought, frequency, possibility. And we're all little monkey minds hiving together in some way. There, it's way beyond our
Yeah. But
our
even more
brand.
than that, it's like I've experienced so many times like somebody like encountering just randomly somebody that they knew from like 10
Oh yeah.
years ago at some like
Oh yeah.
internship in Washington, D.C. And they're like, what are you doing here? Like, what are you doing here?
I
Like,
have 6 stories about that this year alone. I mean, in terms of
yeah.
being in the same time in the same place, passing across with someone, or crossing a path with someone, and just hearing their voice and being like, "Oh my god!" And boom, we're an interface, and we spend the rest of the day together. You know what I mean? It's like there's
Yeah.
such an interesting time moment. Uh, I dare I say synchrodestiny, that sort of thing. I mean, everything happens for a reason. Those sorts of concepts, but it just happens so frequently out there. It's kind of,
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
Well,
I
that
mean,
kind of gets to the third part of this show is what is the impact of Burning Man on you in your life?
Oh boy, howdy.
Yeah, big,
Have
just
you
short
12 more
question.
episodes?
Yeah, and words or less, you know.
People, places, things, art, better, abundance, like just cup overflowing in terms of uh how much there is out there um
Well,
and
what
how
impact has it had on your life? I mean, because it seems like when you were in school and you were casting about and you were like, oh, I'll study this or I'll study that. And then you get introduced to this and then, sort of taking your life in this other direction.
yeah, I mean, I did my undergraduate in art, and I didn't really want to depend on art to be my stream of income, because then that would sort of compromise my self-expression. And some I wanted to like keep it cordoned away so that it could be pure and free and not dictated by some commissioner's needs.
Hmm.
Um, and so I went into the service industry, and education. The field of education was really my main jam for like a decade. I was a teacher in after school programs, and I worked in special
Okay.
education at the high school level. And teens are really my jam. Teens are such a hard time for all humans. This isn't just an
Hmm.
American phenomenon. I think even historically, that at 14 is when kids were really adults. Once you menstruate and can have your own family, that's historically when you can fly the coop.
Yeah.
And nowadays, it's like not until you're 18. So there's this like very long chapter in there that's like, I am an independent individual with my own thoughts and feelings, and yet I still remain dependent on this caretaker that I both love and despise. And so there's this back and forth of like, how do you reconcile that? And couple that with peers.
Yeah.
What it is to be steeped in the peer environment at that time. There is no other world than what your classmates are, and I can't even imagine for the teens at this point with online exposure and
Oh God.
cyberbullying and all that bullshit. I mean, they don't
Social
even have
media.
real
Yeah.
relationships. They don't break up in person or even on the phone. It's all by text now. It's like there's such this interpersonality. And so I think it's important to have an ally during that time to be like, dude, this is not all there is. Like, there is another side to this. You can get through this. Here's some tools and tips and tricks to just deal. You know what I mean? Like, and trying to bring teens back to what I don't know. Either way, that's been my passion. That's been my most interesting point of service, I
Are you
guess.
still working in that now?
No, I finished my sort of career with teaching in 2008 when I finished my graduate degree at UNH in alternative building structures and sustainability education and design is what my master's degree is in. And then I started working with earthships and Arcosanti and sort of looking into alternative building designs. And
So what exactly is Earth Chips?
earthships are like self-contained homes that are generally built out of recycled materials, pound tires, and bottle or can walls.
Ah.
They collect their own water, they produce their own energy, they produce their own food, they deal with their own waste through like blackwater planter gardens and stuff. And they're meant to be kind of autonomous living systems.
Huh.
I mean, Michael Reynolds describes it as I in Trash Warrior, Garbage Warrior, the documentary on him, he says something like, he's not busy arguing with people that are sinking on the Titanic. He's sitting there building life rafts. And so earthships are life rafts. They're autonomous buildings that kind
Ah.
of reduce our dependency on the larger grids and systems at place
Uh-huh.
and kind of put us back in the driver's seat of like, what does the individual need and how can we do that for ourselves without having to be relying on these larger systems.
Oh,
So yeah, really, and they
that's
exist on pretty
fascinating.
much, yeah, they exist on every continent save Antarctica, and they can be built. They're generally like U-shaped forms with a southern glazing, so that they can get passive solar and
Uh-huh.
charge a thermal mass of the building, and they use recycled materials. And yeah, I mean, just do a little Google search, and you'll have
Yeah. No, I've
a
noticed that
mighty
you've
fine rabbit hole to go down.
yeah, no, because I've noticed it over the years that you've posted various things, and I'm always like, "What is this? This is fascinating," and especially like the gardening stuff. And I was just like, "Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah." So
yeah,
are
it's
you?
awesome.
So you're still involved with that now, or is that what you're doing now? Or
No, no. So in 2008, I was lucky enough to help pound tires on their educational center in Taos. And then shortly thereafter, I worked on a project down in Jamaica that was sort of Michael described as his like crown jewel. It was just this gorgeous two circular homes on the top of a petrified coral atoll, right on the
uh-huh.
western edge of this island. So the sunset was just like right between. Oh, it's
Wow.
deal. And yeah, I worked with him for a little while, and then I lived at Arco Santi, which is another sort of experimental urban laboratory in the our Arizona desert that was designed by Paolo Soleri, an Italian architect that I also was lucky enough to work with while he was still alive and in his final chapter. Um, and then I was just more like, okay, I've done all these alternative buildings. What about actual code construction? Because this is all well and
Mm.
good and these bubbles out there in the desert. But what about like in the world? Like in Austin was sort of the forefront of green building. Every cover of Dwell magazine was a new construction in Austin. So I decided to settle in there and deconstruct and reconstruct a building in city proper according to code, but using as much alternative stuff as I could, kind of muster
Hmm.
to get in there. And that was my one of my greatest learning platforms, you know. And right now, currently, I'm really happy to say that I've kind of full circled around, and I'm just in the last month, I've been working with a 3D printing company here in New Hampshire, of all places.
Wow.
Our head offices are in New York, but right now, even like my boss was the one who just pinged in on this interview. We're doing a 3D residential casting. So it's 3D printed concrete. And I just finished work on a 3D printed artificial reef that's
Oh.
slated to go off the coast of Miami. So these are prototypes to generate fundraising to have these reefs sort of stimulate ecotourism and let
Yeah.
natural reefs get back to their normal, and then also propagate new reefs and create like a cool underwater sculpture park, essentially, where the
Oh,
the fishes get free rent.
yeah.
The
Yeah.
free
So
rent
these
off
like
the coast of Miami. That's a good place to be a little fish.
yeah. So these Earth ships and this stuff, these concepts. I mean, is that good for like in New England where it's like the cold weather too? Because you said like a lot of it was out in the desert, but
Hilarious is in 2008 when I was writing my dissertation for it, we had a major blizzard here that shut down the state.
uh-huh.
And as I'm writing my sort of grand finale about the project and working with Earthships and Arcosanti, and we're out of power. I'm writing by candlelight. We have to flush our system with antifreeze. We have to figure out. I have to like charge my computer by my car, and I knew there was an Earthship in Durham, New Hampshire, where the
Oh.
university. They don't disclose necessarily where it is because it's a private residence, but I knew that there was one here. And the whole week I was thinking to myself, they are probably just fine. They've got water. Their power might be a little I mean, they just have to get the snow off their solar panels, but they have enough incubation in their thermal mass, and they probably have food production, and they probably, you know, it's like they're this little
Huh.
hovel, little island of self-sufficiency, and the rest of us are up shit creek because the power went out with the heavy ice, and then we had a snowstorm that buried everything. So some people, they couldn't find the lines. I mean, some people were out of power for like 2 weeks. You know, it shut down
Wow.
the whole state. I mean, we were in a state of emergency for for at least one day. Everything was shut down. But then to propose this to my university professors and be like, never was there a better time to propose to consider these autonomous structures and the benefit of them, especially in the even here in this frigid environment. You know,
Yeah.
their sort of mecca is down in Taos, is in New Mexico. They have the Greater World community, and they have two other communities that are. I mean, well, the Greater World has over 100 Earthships on it. That's really the largest hive of and you can go and stay in them with an Airbnb or do
Hmm.
tours, and the educational center that it's yeah, it's a fascinating endeavor, and there are pros and cons to everything, you know. um yeah, so
Well,
I
do you think that like your experience with Burning Man kind of like influenced your like for because I remember you said you were originally like in like casting and like an art, but then you went to like architecture and like building. I mean,
Oh, it's all interconnected, my friend. Yeah, I mean my work with uh printing lithography informs how you build a building. It's just fascinating how different processes can inform one another. And I that's where my sort of bread and butter is not so much whatever the final object is. It's like I'm really process oriented. So um I do
Yeah.
want a presence. I do want to just rattle off my brag sheet a little bit
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
because there are a few points of interest in here that I just want to like highlight in terms of that diversity of experience. And like I worked for Petrol for fuel on Burning Man
Oh, okay.
here. So Petrol stands for powering everything that runs on location. Isn't that awesome? And it was a hell job. I mean, we have hell station. It was really hard work, but that helped me really appreciate petroleum industry in the real world, going to gas stations and seeing oil tankers filling these tanks and being like, oh my God, I can appreciate that dude doing that job right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What that service is, and I can actually really appreciate it with a boots on the ground perspective of how heavy
Yeah.
that hose is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And where I just might not have even noticed that before. Um, so let's see. Yeah, I started off as a regional contact, and then when I went to Spain, I connected with a few people at Nowhere, and I actually became a cultural attaché
Ooh.
for Spain. That didn't really equate to much other than answering some curiosities from local burners about what that meant going
I
over
was gonna
there.
say, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's just I'm a sort of an attaché, like you're sort of a point of connection. So if someone knew that I knew about that, they could be like, "Hey, I want to go. What does that look like?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, let me tell you." And if you want to get involved with the camp, I know these people that could do that. Or
Ah.
here's a good place to stay. Or have you considered XYZ, which they probably haven't. Those sorts of considerations. And then they bring stuff to my attention that I hadn't considered before that I could then
Huh.
interface with the Nowhere board and get them connected so they can get their questions answered real
It's
time.
almost like a cultural concierge kind of thing.
Yes, yes, yeah, exactamente. Except without the beret. Yes, no accessories or anything. I just get to use the asterisk at the end of attaché.
Yeah.
Um, oh, in 2009, I was blessed enough to be the regional seat on the BlackRock Arts Foundation Grant Review Board.
Ah.
And that was so delightful to help review 300 plus grants and be able to help make those people's dreams come alive. And
Hmm.
I got to sit on the board with Harley Dubois was on the board.
Okay.
Michael Best was on the board. Larry
Oh.
Harvey was on the board. I mean, I got to sit with the big wigs and sit there and go over hundreds of people's dreams and then make them happen. Is there anything better to do in the
Oh,
world?
yeah. Yeah. That's incredible.
Um, and then I did that again in Austin. So I sat on the art garden grant review board for Burning Flipside. I did that 2 years in a row. There were only three of us. I think that's since dissolved or remanaged somehow, but at the time it was like, wow, we got the all like maybe 20 grants. We have so much money from tickets. Like, let's just make them all happen. Let's just give a little here and give a little there. And everybody made some. It was just like, wow, that was such a
Yeah.
cool way to interface and make people's possibilities come alive. Let's see. I worked on the Dragon Smelter crew with Danny Macchiarini casting
Hmm.
recycled aluminum in the middle of the desert. That was great.
Yeah.
And then I started working for the Department of Public Works in 2009. I worked for Gate for post event, doing sort of management and restoration for their gate operations.
Oh,
And
okay.
then from there, I went on and actually did restoration proper for the first time. Um, then I worked on private art, like with the Dan Dossman in 2010. He and his former partner, Karen Cusalito, they had a project called the Imaginarium or something. It was like a series of really big or exploratorium. I know it's not either of those because those are two
Yeah.
things, but it was something like that. And it was like series of dandelions that were fire breathing. So I helped tend to that project. I mean, I wasn't a fabricator or anything, but I was involved. In 2011, I brought my dad for the first time and we did the Circle of Regional Effigies. In 2012, I worked for Arctica for ice sales. in 2013, I was lucky enough to be the first restoration manager for the temple. So we were the first
Ah.
temple to LNT, leave no temple. We got a Resto award, and that was just such a great crew to work on. It was Greg Fleischman's design, the Temple of Holiness. There was no metal in the structure. I was the construction
Wow.
safety lead as well, and that's where I got my playa name was Maven, because I was interfacing for so many different
Ah.
things for that project that Zach Coffin, our chief heavy machine, our crane operator, who is also an incredible artist in steel and
Uh-huh.
steel, he was like, wow, you're like, you hold all of these hats. And someone else had said, yeah, you're like the temple maiden. And he's like, no, not maiden, like a maven.
Yeah.
It's like, ooh, I don't even know what that means, but I like it. And and we actually had the best Wi-Fi in the city at the time. Everyone called it Temple Cafe, so they'd come out to our shade structure and sit on our couches, and because we had the cream of the crop crew that year. Lightning and Sin were the directors, and they could just cherry pick whoever they wanted. You know, it was an
Uh,
awesome crew. But that was the only time I looked up on the internet was Maven to find out that definition, which was an expert in her field that shares her knowledge and skill with others. And that's exactly what I was doing at that time. I was the restoration manager. I was sharing best practices with our crew, and, putting down playa prophylactics, having like we had billboard vinyl throughout our entire work area. Anything that
mhm.
was sanded was in containment. We had to sand and route every single component on site, which was a huge endeavor to maintain
Wow.
all of that sawdust. I mean, there were tens of thousands of components because we had pins, locking pins, and the LVL the structures. There was no metal. All the hardware.
Wow. That's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it was kind of
also,
insane,
like,
but we
because
pulled off.
yeah, no, I do have some listeners, who've never been to Burning Man, don't know much about it, but
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
they're part of the whole like leave no trace thing. It's like, yeah, even sawdust.
Well, wood is actually the number one culprit out there.
Yeah.
Uh, believe it or not. Yeah.
But it must be kind of like hard for some people to imagine, which is like, oh, you have this city of like 70, 80, 90,000 people, like, and you're building all these things and you're burning it. So like, and you're worried about sawdust. It's like, how would you even get sawdust out? It's just like, well, as like people say, it's like, don't let it hit the ground, right?
Yeah, yeah, you don't. That's why playa prophylactics and billboards
Hmm.
are and just tarps are so effective in that process. Yeah, I mean the playa is a blank canvas. It's the biggest, blankest canvas pretty much in the world, I might wager to say.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe
considering how
Antarctica.
but considering this is where the land speed records have been held. This is
Yeah.
where rocket enthusiasts have broken the speed of sound. So when you consider that the tiniest piece of debris starts to accumulate microcrystalline dust on it, and that's what formulates those dunes. When I was doing restoration,
Huh.
I'd pull a single hair can make a dune.
Really?
Amazing what tiny. So when you think of tiny sawdust or wood chip, you're actually generating anomalies on that surface that then will
Ah,
potentially pose a fucking hazard to bodies in motion,
yeah.
especially if they're going the speed of sound. Like,
Yeah.
so it does kind of have a real term impact, and we want to leave it absolute. And we pick up shit from all types of past endeavors. I mean, I've
Oh, I'm
found
sure you guys
hotels.
come across all sorts of exciting things.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, most recently, rebar is one of our biggest culprits because you either don't get it out, and then the what like Black Rock Desert turns into a lake during the winter at times, or a roving lake. Everything gets kind of erased and etch a sketched down, and some of that debris gets buried.
Well,
And
doesn't some of it work its way to the surface too?
that too, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a very living. It's kind of interesting to consider Lake Lahontan, ancient Lake Lahontan
Yeah.
basin, and it moves, it breathes, it shifts, it changes, it expands, it contracts. I've seen it in so many. I love going out there when no one's there because it's just such a geological
Yeah. Yeah.
yeehaw zone. I mean, that's where all those car commercials are filmed for a reason, because it's just the epitome of freedom and
Well, I
paradise.
think that's why Burning Man, like, like a coffee society, people like originally went out there
Shows
because
that,
it's like,
right?
oh, it's just a super remote location. I mean, it's like not just like, oh, it's flat and you can't burn stuff. But like, yeah, it's very remote.
But
So,
it's conducive as a blank canvas. It really allows
oh, it's the
for
ultimate
anything
blank
and
canvas.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So what's next in the Burning Man universe for Amy Bunker?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Well, and I did want to round out. I know we're running
Oh,
out of time and I have so much to say that
well,
I also worked for Eyes on Art for 2 years as an assistant manager. And
what's that?
that's going out at night. So I wanted to work for the artery.
Uh-huh.
I'm not a morning person and they have morning meetings. And I was just like, all right, what's another operation I can do for them? And they have nighttime operations, Eyes on Art. So the
Hmm.
best way I can describe it is we go out at night and we look for things that aren't visible in the dark that might pose a hazard to any body in motion, whether it be someone, an art car, person on a bike, or someone even walking. So that's like a piece of rebar, a pile of construction debris, a guy line on a sculpture, anything that someone might run into that needs some type of illumination to be like, hey, there's a thing here, and that happens especially during build week because people don't have lighting plans for their piles of construction stuff, and
Hmm.
and there aren't really laws yet. Like the 5 mile per hour law hasn't really been instilled yet. People haven't gotten their driving permits yet, so there's a bit of renegade transport in the beginning of the week, and that can pose a lot of hazards.
So do you guys put like lights on things or you just kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
report
yeah.
it or
So
what do you do?
yeah, totally. So it's like it's a whole operation. It's a tri-carbon copy form. One is left with the artist, one goes to the artery, and then one Eyes on Art keeps on file. And this isn't like a you did a wrong thing. It's like a hey,
Oh,
we noticed that your thing wasn't lit and we want it to be. So hey, we lit it for you. We zip tied a glow stick to it, or we put a blinky on it, or we put a delineator around this really big pile with blinky, with delineator, or with
yeah.
um, some kind of illumination. And hey, these are our resources. We'd like to get them back. So if you could come back to the artery, return the resources, and if you don't have them, we can provide them to you. We can kind of like check them out and work it out because we don't want you to be SOL and we don't want you to feel like you did a bad thing. This is a point
Hmm.
of education and we have the resources, not for everyone all the time. That's sort of the thing is like,
Yeah, you only have so many resources. Yeah.
yeah, so if they have a blinky light or some glow sticks or a generator with a rope light or something, they can manage that on the fly and then it's not a problem for bodies in motion again.
Hmm.
I really loved that job because it was so
That sounds
independent.
cool.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had a small team. We had yeah, I could talk about that for an hour in and of itself. Anyways, and then most recently I've been with the restoration department doing resto response during the event. Um, and I think I've come to a close with that department. I've worked with them for like 4 years. I generally run like really it was a 1 year cycle, but in my life, 3 year cycles seem to be about the beginning, middle, and end.
Uh-huh.
And so I've done 4 years with them, and I believe it or not, I you gave me a graduated shirt this year, and strangely enough, after 20 years, I kind of feel like I've graduated into some other relationship. I often joke that Burning Man is my longest term relationship. It's love hate, and I always go back to it. I love it so much. So I didn't go in 2004, and then in 2014 I also didn't go because I had this sort of like, Burning Man isn't what it used to be, and it's supposed to, it's just like, nah. And I stayed home and I baked cookies and I
Missed it
watched.
the whole time.
Oh, absolutely. I took baths and all that stuff and all the modern conveniences. But I was glued to the webcam and I
Oh
listened
yeah.
to
Oh yeah.
BMIR the whole time. And Tom
The whole
Laporte.
time I didn't go, like, yeah, I was glued to it too. Yeah.
And it's kind of sweet because Tom Laporte, who rest his soul, he was my guide on burn night, and he's so
Oh.
beautiful. Like he was sort of emceeing the whole night, and it was
Uh-huh.
on the fly. Like, okay, so now we're gonna go to this person, and they'll be like, oh, and now here I am with, oh, what's going on over there? And I felt so much. I was like, I'm with Tom all night. This is so cool, like. So I
Yeah.
was still very much there. I wasn't like, fuck Burning Man, I'm never going again. I was like, oh,
Well, I
I miss
think that's a
it.
phase that, like,
It
you
was
go to
good to
Burning
have.
Man.
was.
Yeah, but I think if we go for Burning Man for long enough, I think it's a phase that we all kind of go through, or even like Apply a Pete, my episode, what was it, number 10? Because he's been going this next year, we what, 30 years straight. And, I could tell just in the conversation with him, it's like, okay, maybe getting a little bit jaded or like a little, it's like, the kids today.
Oh, absolutely. Well, my dad's first Burning Man in 2010, there was a sticker that came out that year that said, it was so funny. I gave it to him. It said, "This is not your dad's Burning Man. It's changed. It's supposed to."
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's it. And I was like, oh, wow, it really isn't. Because in this situation, there was a real role reversal. I was the sort of like veteran and he was the virgin. And I'm like, let me tell you, like he'd go out on an adventure and I'm like, where's your water? And he's like, I don't need water. And I'm like, Dad, like, thank you for your service. I get that you're a veteran, but you're also a human in
Yeah.
a high altitude desert environment that's trying to kill you. So yeah, you need
But
hydration.
also, you can kind of use that veteran experience on him, turning around him. It's just like, no, as a veteran, it's like you be experienced. It's like if you were in the military and you're going out into the desert, you would have to have so many supplies, and you're like, oh, that's right, like yeah.
Well, but no inferior can tell a superior officer what to do.
Just gently reminding the commanding officer,
Yeah, no, there was
yeah,
definitely some rank going on, and he's a Taurus on top of that. So
yeah.
he brought
No,
out
but
some
it's interesting because like I keep coming back to like the thing that no matter how many conversations I have with people, like I think like it's this sense of like family or connection. It's like even if like
yeah,
years go by and the friends that you go with or family, like things change or it's like
everything's
but it
evolutionary. I
but
mean,
it
that's
all it keeps the thing that like okay, what do you think it is that like keeps you coming back?
the glue. Yeah, well, and I've gone through this sort of reason season lifetime with many different tribes and communities and friendships, even throughout
Yeah.
these last 2 decades, um, and that's the sort of evolution of things is we connect with people and then our interests shift and change and we get to migrate into different pastures. So for me, I mean, what keeps me involved is really the people, the art, the creativity, the possibility. There's no other event like if and when I go to a Pain concert now, I'm just kind of disgusted along the way of like, oh, the trash and the commerce and
Well,
the
it's more of a consumer kind of thing, like yeah.
yeah, and I'm like not and I don't want to feel like Bernier than thou, and I'm on some type of
Well,
like,
you want to be
we
a
everyone
participant,
should do it
right?
our way or something. But I've seen real benefits of what burner culture fosters in the real world, in the default world, so to speak.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Um, so I think that's a big impetus for me. What's keeping me involved right now, I'm noticing myself stepping back from the big kahuna and much more interested in, like, I went to a really small regional event in Tennessee called To the Moon last year,
Hmm.
and it was just so quaint and sweet, and the land was wonderful and the art was really nice, and it felt so like
Yeah.
just nice. Not this big to do and the party and the lights I mean, it was just, I was with a group that had a lot of family members in it. We had a temple with tea services. We had like we were the monks of simple pleasures, or of tiny comforts. That's what it was. Monks
That's
of tiny
funny.
comforts. So like what brings you a tiny comfort, and like just reminding yourself of that, like that little inner child, like, oh,
Yeah.
I like this thing. Why don't I incorporate that into my life? Like
Yeah.
that's
I mean, I can see like the regionals because they're smaller. They were just more like personal, like a smaller scale. It's like it's not like this tens of thousands of people, like
well, on
yeah.
that note, I'm going to say Love Burn is it is blowing up. I mean, I think it's over 10,000 people now, and
Really?
yeah, it's massive,
Wow.
and it's had to sort of expand to another road, and there's infrastructure concerns about that because there has to be public access to certain beaches at the ends of those
Hmm.
roads. So but that's kind of part of the beauty of the dancing of that event, and how it continues to kind of shift left, shift right, and tango around what the city needs, what works for them, how they can generate an alliance, that there can be a both and instead of an either or.
Yeah.
There, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the public street that bicyclists and pedestrians can go down, it's just like a no nakey zone. You know what I mean? That's like the only real restriction in our book. So if
Yeah.
you go over to the state park side, like it's a true burner event where you can do whatever, not do whatever you want, as long as you aren't harming another. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
there's a little more freedom, I guess, on the ocean side of things. But I'm really turned on and stimulated by the arts production there and and the fostering of the arts. That was something that I was interested in when I was in the burner community, when I was the regional art network ambassador. I was fostering, I did a Kickstarter project that brought Flaming Lotus Girls and Charlie and the Art of Such and Such to Flipside. And I
Mm.
wanted to do these collaboration, cross pollination between regional artists. And I noticed so many artists putting their stuff into storage, paying for it just to have it rust. And I'm like, we
Mm.
should get this thing on like a circuit. You know what I mean? Like have like an
Mm.
art tour and get more
Yeah.
eyes on and visibility and potentially even patrons with permanent installation somewhere. You know, these things shouldn't have to be the burden of the artist funded them in the first place as a gift.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Um,
Amy, I think we could probably go
time to wrap
on
up.
for another couple
Yeah.
of hours, but maybe we'll have to do a Amy Bunker 2.0 some one of these days. Yeah, like, yeah, I think we're only barely scratching the surface here.
Only
But
Bill, yeah. Thank you
uh,
so much for
is there
letting
any
me
like if
just
anybody
brain
wants to?
drain.
Oh, you're
Yeah.
welcome. But if anybody wants to reach you,
Oh,
do you even want people to reach you, or have like a email or a website or anything or anything you
yeah,
want to plug?
yeah, that's interesting. I won't give my direct email, but I will give my website, which is my name, Amy Bunker, AMYBUNKER.com. So easy. And that has some contact on there if you want to find my Facebook. And I think it might have an email if you really want to seek me out. And that has a video of my public arts project and a portfolio of some of my work. So
No,
that's a
excellent.
good way to track something down if you're interested in anything I said.
Well, thank you so much. And this has been awesome.
Oh,
And I have a feeling that we're going to have to come back for Amy Bunker 2.0
I
before
and
too long.
3.0 and 6.0. Keep it going. We can just
Yeah.
do a whole subsidiary Amy show.
All
Love
right.
you. Love
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this show, please subscribe, rate, and review it on Apple Podcasts. It just helps to get this show seen. Please tell a friend and help to spread the word. If there's enough support, we can do a lot more of these shows and publish more shows per month. If you would like to contact us about being a guest, what you think about the show, or whatever, please send an email to shadowofthemanpodcast, that's all one word, at gmail.com. You can also follow Shadow of the Man on social media on Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube. The links for these pages are all available on the front page of shadowoftheman, all one word, .com. See you next month for a new episode of The Shadow of the Man.
Thank you for listening to this latest show. We have to make another one, so gotta go. Don't worry, for next month we already have one in the can. Very soon you'll be listening to a new Shadow of the Man.